Welcome to Forgotten Songs of the Little Red Songbook. My name is Stephen Harvey. I'd like to start out with a quote from the book Joe Hill, the IWW and the Making of a Revolutionary Working Class Culture by Franklin Rosemont. The sheer number of Wobbly poets is staggering. No one has attempted a full count, but it is a safe bet that the IWW has had more poets than most unions have members. Even more impressive, however, is the diversity and quality of the poetic work these rebellious wage slaves produced. In Wobbly halls, in diners, or in flops on the road, in jails, and around the jungle fires, these poets with red cards in their pockets wrote songs, odes, sonnets, free verse ballads, limericks, jingles, ditties, and even a few haiku. Their poems range from the elegiac and narrative to the satirical and mock heroic, from the alliterative and witty to the profoundly lyrical, with now and then a bold ascent into the blackest humor or the truly visionary. Much IWW poetry has been doggerel or the work of mere rhymesters. But the union's poets have included a large number of first-rate songsmiths, several world-class parodists, and even a few true poet-seers in the great anti-traditional tradition. Now, this project was inspired and enabled by the work of fellow worker DJ Alperovitz, who has put together an immense online collection of materials on the industrial workers of the world. And this included a scanned copy of every edition of the Little Red Songbook from 1909 to the present. Now, I also used a book called the Big Red Songbook, 250 plus IWW songs, which features notes on each song from the labor lawist Archie Green. And in addition to these two books, I also referred to Rebel Voices, an IWW anthology edited by Joyce Kornbluh. So as I looked through the Little Red Songbooks and read the Big Red Songbook, it occurred to me there were a lot of songs I'd never heard sung, and I'm not sure anyone else had, possibly at some point, and that I would really like to hear them sung. Some of them because they were of historical importance, both in particular for the IWW, but also the larger labor movement in general, and some because they also still hold a contemporary resonance. If I was going to sing these songs outside the parameters of this project, I would change a lot of the language to make it a little more contemporary, and I did take the liberty of changing a couple of lines in the song, The Everett County Jail. So it was quite a lot of fun to try and track down the tunes to some of these songs, which were of course popular a century or more ago, and as you might suspect, the internet came in very handy for that. And also helpful was reading materials on Richard Brazier, who wrote most of the songs for the first edition of the Little Red Songbook. This included a fascinating interview done by Archie Green. I had access to this material thanks to the kindness of fellow worker Tara Forbes. And an interview with an old-time Wobbly named Paul Durst, conducted by the late well-known folk singer Art Thiem, is also interesting with regards to Wobbly songs. Very few editions of the Little Red Songbook included music or guitar chords, the reason being, of course, that the lyrics were set to tunes that mostly anyone with access to a radio would be familiar with. They would have also been heard in the bars and saloons and in music halls. Popular songs of the day, along with hymns, were the ideal vehicle to set subversive lyrics to. Archie Green has suggested that John G. Newhouse, the Wobbly who first conceived of the idea of creating a compendium of all the songs from the Little Red Songbook, furnished tunes for some of the lyrics sent in to the editors of the songbook. Green asserts that some of the songs were simply unsingable, and I certainly found difficulty in some of the songs I would have liked to sing, but they didn't quite scan and the tunes didn't quite fit. There is one song that I made an exception and I set to a different tune, which you'll hear later on. Although I use the term the Little Red Songbook throughout this, I should note the title Little Red Songbook was used for the first and only time on the 35th, or rather the 36th International Edition in 1995. Other than that, it's just an affectionate and shorter name which most people use. The first songbook was simply entitled Songs of the Industrial Workers of the World. The next edition in 1910 added To Fan the Flames of Discontent, and these two phrases have formed the title in one form or another in most editions since. I just want to mention an odd quote that appears on the inside page of the 19th edition. It says, "Songs of life," and "take out the words, if so must be, but leave, oh leave the melody," which seems almost antithetical to the purpose of the Little Red Songbook. Now, most of these songs I have chosen to sing could fit into Franklin Rosemont's category of doggerel, or the work of mere rhymesters. Sometimes that's the appeal. The reality is many of these songs were composed by IWW members in the logging and mining camps, in the fields and factories. They were composed by working people, not professional songsters, so there is a rawness, but also an immediacy to them. Those of us who have been hit with sudden lyrical inspiration and grabbed a familiar tune to hitch it to will readily understand the results aren't always poetic, but they often speak to the heart of the matter in an immediate way. One of the things I like about some of the songs that began to appear in the Little Red Songbook is their caustic humor. We're familiar with songs that detail a rotten employer, or with grand songs that state defiance and purpose. The most famous example of the latter being, I would guess, Solidarity Forever, written by fellow worker Ralph Chaplin. Some Wobbly songsters took a different approach, however, and took a not-so-gentle dig at the workers themselves, putting the onus on them to change their situation. Here's a quote from Archie Green in a 1953 interview with Fred Thompson, Carl Keller, and Joyce Kornbluh. "There is use of humor, sardonic humor, light humor, satire, parody, parable. It's hard to think of any segment of the American Union movement that used humor as effectively as the Wobblies." I did, of course, include a couple of more sober examples of IWW songs. At any rate, I hope you find this enjoyable and interesting. Maybe you'll even be inspired to sing some of the songs yourself.